Prince William made his first major move since assuming full control of royal affairs, a sweeping internal review of the royal household's military structure. And at the center of it stood one man, Lieutenant Colonel Johnny Thompson, the stoic, kilt-clad figure once known to the British public as the King's most trusted aide. The announcement came quietly, without fanfare, yet the implications were anything but small. William, now operating as de facto sovereign amid King Charles's extended retreat from duties, issued a decree recognizing several long-serving members of the royal military staff. The most prominent among them was Thompson, who was formally promoted to the position of super equerry, a rare and prestigious appointment historically reserved for the monarch's closest and most loyal personal aides. But this wasn't merely a ceremonial gesture. Behind the polished medals and rehearsed smiles, William's decision carried the weight of strategy, a subtle but unmistakable signal of how the new Prince Regent intends to govern. According to one senior royal correspondent, William's first instinct was not to punish, but to purify. He's rewarding loyalty, trimming excess, and setting the tone for a new era, one built on discipline and moral authority. For Lieutenant Colonel Thompson, the promotion marked a dramatic turn in an already storied career. Known for his unwavering composure beside King Charles and Queen Camilla, the Scottish officer had long been admired by the public both for his sharp military bearing and his quiet dignity. Yet, in the months leading up to William's rise, Thompson had grown increasingly disillusioned. Sources close to the regiment say he had even expressed intentions to leave the army altogether, citing ethical fatigue and internal politics within Camilla's household. His decision came after a turbulent year serving under Queen Camilla's direction, where, according to insiders, the traditional codes of loyalty were often tested against personal ambitions. One palace aide described the environment as cloaked politeness hiding a constant power struggle. It was during this period that a rival officer, Major Alistair Grant, a longtime Camilla favorite, was rumored to have been groomed to replace Thompson. Grant, whose rise was quietly facilitated through Camilla's private office, was seen as more pliable and courtly traits that appealed to the Queen Consort's inner circle. William's decision to override that faction and reinstate Thompson to a superior rank sent shockwaves through the royal establishment. It was, as one insider put it, the quiet war before the open peace. The ceremony itself was discreet, held in the state ballroom at Windsor Castle under tight security last Friday. There were no cameras allowed, no official photographers, and only a carefully selected list of attendees among them. Princess Catherine, the Duchess of Cambridge, who has increasingly emerged as William's strategic counterpart. Witnesses reported that when Thompson received his medal, Catherine nodded in silent acknowledgement, a gesture many interpreted as a personal endorsement. Public reaction was swift and overwhelmingly supportive. Social media across the United Kingdom lit up with praise for the humble hero, as thousands of users recalled Thompson's years of service. One comment on X read, "He represents everything we wish the monarchy still stood for: grace, loyalty, and quiet strength." Another fan wrote, "If anyone deserves this title, it's him. He stood with dignity when others crumbled." What made this moment so powerful wasn't only Thompson's promotion, it was what it represented. In promoting him, William wasn't simply recognizing military merit. He was reclaiming the moral narrative of the crown. By lifting up a man who had once been sidelined by palace politics, the future king was sending a clear message. Under his reign, service would be honored over self-interest. Still, not everyone inside the palace was pleased. Reports suggest Queen Camilla viewed the move as provocative and disrespectful, particularly after losing one of her most visible allies within the royal guard. A source close to Clarence House said she felt personally undermined and saw the promotion as a direct challenge to her influence. The same insider added, "Camilla had her own people in place, and she doesn't take kindly to surprises." For William, however, the risk appears calculated. The Sunday Royal noted that this was his way of testing the waters before introducing deeper reforms within the royal chain of command, a restructuring that could reshape not just personnel, but power itself. And then there's Princess Catherine, who, according to palace aides, has played a pivotal behind-the-scenes role in this decision. Her relationship with the royal staff has long been one of warmth and quiet respect, and it's rumored she personally requested that Thompson be reassigned under her extended household as part of a long-term modernization effort. As one insider said, Catherine trusts him not only as a soldier but as a man of character. Bringing him into her circle strengthens both her position and the institution she represents. If that proves true, the dynamic within the palace could shift dramatically in the months ahead. With Thompson now serving under both William and Catherine's supervision, the new royal leadership is consolidating a base of loyalty that transcends traditional hierarchy, one rooted in integrity, not fear. But what will this mean for Camilla's faction and for the aging monarch caught between them? For now, Buckingham remains silent. Yet, among the marble halls and whispered corridors, one sentiment lingers. The age of quiet loyalty is making a comeback, and its first champion wears a kilt. Behind the heavy doors of Windsor Castle's state ballroom, the atmosphere was charged with quiet significance. There were no trumpets, no televised moment, no royal Instagram post, just a sharp click of polished shoes, hushed voices in ceremonial uniforms, and the unmistakable scent of strategy in the air. It was in this understated setting that Lieutenant Colonel Johnny Thompson received his Super Equerry title, a distinction not bestowed in decades, and never before under such politically charged circumstances. The ceremony was short but symbolic. Only a handful of observers were present, each carefully selected not just for rank or role, but for loyalty. Princess Catherine stood toward the rear, flanked by senior aides and trusted figures from her team. She wore navy understated, deliberate. Her presence alone was a message. She was not just supporting the ceremony, she was witnessing a turning point. When William stepped forward and pinned the royal insignia to Thompson's chest, he didn't give a speech. He didn't need to. The gesture said more than words ever could. Loyalty is seen, loyalty is rewarded. But outside that gilded room, the tremors were already spreading, especially through Clarence's house. Queen Camilla, once the commanding influence over much of King Charles's ceremonial staffing, was said to be blindsided by the promotion. Sources claim she had expected Major Alistair Grant, a decorated but less experienced officer, to take on the key responsibilities Thompson had once held. Grant, who had been a rising star in Camilla's private household, had gained favor through flattery and formality, rather than field-earned trust. It was widely known within military and palace circles that his appointment had been carefully orchestrated to replace Thompson, a move that drew quiet resentment from many in the royal guard. He was Camilla's pick. One insider confirmed. He got the velvet path, while Johnny got pushed aside. Everyone saw it. When news of Thompson's promotion broke internally, Grant reportedly left the training wing of the guard in the middle of a session. A source close to the regiment said, he didn't say a word. Just walked out, gloves off, jaw locked. Camilla's reaction, however, was far less subtle. According to whispers among senior palace staff, she summoned her communications team within an hour. Her goal wasn't to issue a statement, but to contain the story. She feared, rightly so, that the promotion would be seen as a deliberate correction to her earlier influence. And in many ways, it was. The Queen Consort's inner circle has since entered what some are calling crisis messaging mode. In private, she allegedly dismissed the move as performative and claimed that Thompson was better suited to horse parades than palace policy. But in public, she remained silent. That silence, however, was deafening. Camilla thrives on control, said one former palace aide. She builds alliances behind closed doors. She positions people strategically, and she never forgets a slight. What William just did, that wasn't a snub. That was an eviction. And the military noticed. Several senior officers quietly expressed renewed confidence in William's leadership, especially after months of internal disillusionment. The younger officers, many of whom had admired Thompson's style of steady professionalism, saw the promotion as justice served. Even royal traditionalists took note. Lord Brigham, a retired military attaché with long-standing ties to the palace, told the Sunday Herald, "In a time when public trust in the monarchy is fragile, elevating someone like Johnny Thompson, who has served with dignity and never exploited his access, sends the right message." Indeed, Thompson's image has become something of a cultural artifact. He's been called the kilted sentinel, the loyal shadow, and even the people's aide by fans on social media. A recent viral thread on X detailed his quiet gestures during public engagements, offering a hand to elderly guests, shielding Catherine from sudden flashes, discreetly guiding children away from chaotic crowds. "He's not a celebrity," one post read. "He's the kind of man who makes you believe some traditions are still worth preserving." It's this public affection combined with a deep well of internal respect that makes Thompson's return to royal service so potent. But even more telling was the structure of the new role. William did not place Thompson back under Charles or Camilla. Instead, he realigned him under the joint operational command of the Prince and Princess of Wales, effectively shifting the power base away from the older generation and into his own orbit. Catherine, too, is said to be forming her own quietly expanding support unit, a modernized version of the Queen's Ladies-in-Waiting, with a deeper focus on diplomacy, family outreach, and veteran affairs. Thompson's inclusion in that unit is both symbolic and tactical. "Catherine respects protocol, but she understands power," said a former Kensington Palace official. Bringing Thompson into her circle gives her a bridge between the old guard and the new vision. She sees him as a compass. As for Thompson himself, those close to him describe him as grateful but cautious. One friend said, "He's not someone who enjoys the spotlight, but he believes in duty, and he knows that William and Catherine value what he brings. That's all he's ever wanted." The public, it seems, agrees. An online poll conducted by Royalist Weekly within 48 hours of the promotion showed 82% approval for Thompson's return, with comments overwhelmingly praising his integrity. Yet with every strategic move comes tension. Camilla, who once dominated royal protocol decisions during Charles's rise, now finds herself increasingly isolated, and Thompson's reappearance only adds to the rift. Her supporters fear more reshuffles are coming. Already, several of her favored aides have reportedly begun preparing for reassignment or quiet exits. As one anonymous senior aide told The Telegraph, "This isn't just about a promotion. It's about succession. It's about who holds the reins and who gets left behind." And William, ever measured, hasn't said a word publicly. But through action, through one sharp, calculated decision, he has made his intentions clear. Loyalty is back in fashion, and the crown is realigning itself one quiet warrior at a time. Within hours of the Windsor ceremony, whispers turned to tension, and tension hardened into strategy. Queen Camilla may have remained outwardly composed, but behind palace walls, she was already marshalling her response. Her inner circle, often dubbed the Velvet Court by royal insiders for its discreet but potent influence, convened an urgent meeting. Their goal: to reassert Camilla's presence over royal military affairs and reframe the narrative surrounding Thompson's promotion as a misstep driven by sentiment. At the heart of her counterplay was Major Alistair Grant, the man she had long championed as a replacement for Thompson. Though Grant lacked the battlefield credibility and public loyalty that Johnny Thompson had earned, he was polished, media-ready, and above all, loyal to Camilla. Sources say she pushed for Grant to be given a new ceremonial title, a symbolic attempt to create a mirror equerry under her household, thereby maintaining an appearance of parity. Camilla doesn't lose ground without reclaiming something else. One royal aide noted, "If she couldn't block Johnny's rise, she'd elevate someone of her own." What followed was a series of internal reshufflings. Camilla began reassigning key personnel within her extended household, placing longtime allies in more prominent ceremonial roles, a clear message that her reign within the royal family structure was far from over. But perhaps the most telling development came when an anonymous leak surfaced in a tabloid. The article suggested that Thompson's promotion had been emotionally motivated due to Princess Catherine's personal affection, rather than based on merit. While the article didn't cite sources, palace insiders privately acknowledged that the language bore hallmarks of Camilla's press strategy: dismissive, strategic, and meant to sow doubt. The leak backfired. Public support for Thompson only intensified. Social media exploded in defense of the decorated officer. One viral comment read, "You don't serve through 3 royal generations. Stand silent through scandal, and remain devoted to crown and country only to be called a sympathy hire." Meanwhile, Princess Catherine, widely admired for her calm elegance, made no public statement. Instead, she let her next move speak volumes. She formally extended Thompson's duties into her charitable and diplomatic operations, signaling that he was no longer just William's aide, he was part of her royal strategy. And so, the palace chessboard shifted once more. Camilla, wounded but calculating, now faced an uncomfortable reality. The royal future was being reshaped, and she was no longer the architect. While the public watched the promotion of Lieutenant Colonel Thompson as a triumphant moment of loyalty rewarded, inside the palace, fault lines deepened. What began as a single ceremony at Windsor had now fractured Buckingham into two competing centers of influence. The House of William and Catherine, efficient, youthful, forward-facing, and the fading but still formidable shadow of Queen Camilla's court. At the heart of this power divide was a single, unsettling truth. King Charles had gone silent. Since his extended retreat for health reasons, Charles had delegated increasing levels of authority to William. While official statements described this as transitional support, insiders confirmed what many had already suspected, that William was functionally ruling. And with that, power came choices, promotions, appointments, restructures, each one chipping away at the influence Camilla once wielded effortlessly through her proximity to the king. Her reaction, however, was anything but passive. In the week following Thompson's elevation, Camilla launched a series of symbolic countermeasures aimed at preserving her legacy and reinforcing her authority over the royal ceremonial machine. First came the appointment of Major Alistair Grant to a newly created position, Royal Ceremonial Advisor to the Queen Consort, a title with no historical precedent, but one meant to elevate Grant back into public view. Then came her unofficial gatherings, described by staff as strategy teas, in which she hosted key allies from the older guard, former aides, traditionalists, and minor aristocrats whose loyalty to Charles had, by default, extended to her. During one such event, Camilla allegedly referred to the current power shift as a dangerous concentration of influence in untested hands. But the contrast between her court and that of William and Catherine could not have been starker. Where Camilla's circle moved through hierarchy, patronage, and personal loyalty, the Prince and Princess of Wales were building a meritocratic engine. Catherine, in particular, began quietly formalizing a new structure within her office, one that emphasized diplomacy, service-based legacy, and visible integrity. Lieutenant Colonel Thompson's transition into this ecosystem was seamless. No longer simply a royal bodyguard, he now oversaw coordination between the Wales household and senior military liaisons, handling everything from planning Catherine's upcoming diplomatic tour to advising on veteran charity partnerships. To the public, it was subtle, but to the palace, it was seismic. He's become more than an equerry, noted one royal watcher. He's become a symbol. Every time he appears beside Catherine now, it reminds everyone that loyalty counts and that Camilla no longer controls the image of military dignity in this monarchy. But not everyone inside the armed ranks took the transition quietly. A small but vocal group of officers, primarily aligned with Clarence House, began raising concerns not publicly, but through back channels. One senior figure in the royal household cavalry warned of a dangerous politicization of military appointments. Though unnamed, many suspected this was a veiled swipe at William's reshuffling of military personnel tied too closely to Camilla. Within the Royal Scots, Thompson's own battalion morale reportedly surged. Soldiers who had once felt the monarchy drifting into ceremonial excess said they now felt seen. One NCO commented anonymously, "For once, someone who actually served with us is being recognized, not someone who drank tea in the right parlor." The military establishment was splitting subtly, but undeniably. What made the situation even more volatile was the continued silence from King Charles. Multiple reports confirmed he had been briefed on the restructuring, including Camilla's displeasure, but chose to remain out of it. "He wants peace, not another Windsor war," said one former aide. But by not speaking, he's letting the lines harden. And harden they did. Catherine, with Thompson now a daily presence beside her, began expanding her outreach efforts. Behind closed doors, she met with advisors to form a new advisory council on veterans' welfare, a move that put her in direct competition with a former Camilla initiative that had grown dormant. The message was clear. Catherine would not dismantle Camilla's legacy. She would absorb it, improve it, and outlast it. Meanwhile, Camilla's staff fought to control headlines. Leaks began appearing in sympathetic press outlets, suggesting that Thompson's role was temporary or that his influence was overstated. Yet none of those stories stuck. If anything, they fed into a growing narrative of resistance versus reform. And the people? They had already chosen their side. Approval ratings for William and Catherine surged to their highest levels in 5 years, driven in part by what the press dubbed the loyalty reset. Commentators compared Thompson's rise to the symbolic gestures Queen Elizabeth II once used to reinforce trust: quiet, dignified, earned. Camilla's court, by contrast, began to shrink. Attendance at her private engagements reportedly dropped. Longtime allies, sensing the winds of change, grew cautious. "She's not out," one royal insider clarified. But she's not untouchable anymore either. As the monarchy edges into a new era, where symbolism is strategy, and every appearance is a statement, the question lingers in every gilded hallway. Can two courts exist under one crown? And more urgently, when the king no longer commands, who truly reigns? It began with an image. A single photo, released without press briefing, quietly posted to the official Kensington Palace account. Princess Catherine, standing atop a Highland overlook in Scotland, wind brushing through her coat, with Lieutenant Colonel Johnny Thompson just a pace behind her, dressed in full formal kilted uniform, eyes forward, face unreadable. It wasn't just a photo. It was a declaration. For the first time since his promotion, Thompson had returned not only to Scotland, the land of his regiment, the 5th Battalion Royal Regiment of Scotland, but also to the front lines of Catherine's growing royal campaign. This was not coincidence. According to insiders, Catherine specifically requested the visit as part of a newly launched veterans rehabilitation initiative tied to her broader Duty and Dignity program, an effort that blends mental health support, community leadership, and post-service opportunity. And she asked that Thompson lead it. He didn't hesitate. A palace source confirmed. This wasn't about optics. This was about legacy, hers and his. The visit triggered a national response. Crowds gathered across Edinburgh and Inverness, lining the roads and waving Scottish flags. Veterans stood at attention. Children wore cardboard crowns. Local newspapers ran headlines like "The Princess and Her Soldier" and "Loyalty Comes Home." And then, without warning, came the confrontation that stunned the nation. During a closed-door reception in Edinburgh's Military Assembly Hall, Major Alistair Grant, Camilla's favored appointee, and now royal ceremonial advisor, arrived unannounced. Sources say he had not been formally invited but was escorted in under Camilla's directive, citing a shared interest in the program. What followed was brief, but explosive. Witnesses claim that Grant, dressed in full ceremonial attire, attempted to present a speech in support of Queen Camilla's historical commitment to military charities. Catherine reportedly declined the offer, stating calmly that the event's schedule was already final and non-political. Grant insisted. Tension rose. Then came Thompson. Witnesses say he stepped between Grant and the dais not with aggression, but with posture. Without speaking, he subtly blocked Grant's path, his shoulders squared in silent defiance. The room went still. Officers in the crowd shifted uneasily. No words were exchanged. But the message was unmistakable. Not here. Not anymore. Grant exited 5 minutes later. The reception resumed. By that evening, the incident had reached London, and the headlines wrote themselves. Equerry standoff in Edinburgh. Thompson blocks Camilla loyalist in shocking show of allegiance. Palace divide no longer denied. The monarchy could no longer pretend this was just transition. Inside Buckingham, pressure mounted for an official response. King Charles, still distant, reportedly receiving medical care at Sandringham, refused comment. Camilla, according to insiders, was furious and demanded clarification. William declined to issue any formal statement, standing by the principle that the royal family should speak through action, not impulse. But Catherine, ever poised, made her position known without a single press release. The very next day, Kensington Palace published a report outlining the expansion of the Duty and Dignity initiative into 6 new regions across the UK. The report included Thompson's name under the title, Senior Royal Liaison for Veteran Reintegration. With that, he had been officially installed not just as super equerry, but as Catherine's chief operational officer on military affairs. And the Queen Consort? She went conspicuously silent. For many watchers, This was the moment the line in the royal sand became a wall. "This isn't just about protocol anymore," said royal analyst Francesca Lyle on BBC Newsnight. "This is about who defines the soul of the monarchy going forward, a model of modern discipline and earned trust, or one of inherited authority and personal networks." Across the UK, sentiment shifted further toward William and Catherine. Polls conducted by the Royal Trust Index that week showed a 9% surge in public trust for the couple and, more significantly, an 11% decline in favorable perception of Queen Camilla. Among military households, the split was more dramatic. 72% supported Thompson's new role. Fewer than 18% viewed Camilla's influence as constructive. And in Scotland, Thompson's quiet return turned into a cultural event. Veterans shared old photos of him during training. A commemorative mural went up overnight in Glasgow reading, "The Soldier Who Stood." Thousands shared the image online with the hashtag number Right Hand of Wales, a subtle nod to Catherine's title and Thompson's unwavering presence behind her. And perhaps most telling of all, in a moment captured by local press, a young girl approached Catherine at a Highland stop and asked, "Is that your knight?" Catherine smiled. Then she looked at Thompson and answered simply, "He's one of the good ones." For a monarchy navigating reinvention, fractured loyalties, and a public starving for authenticity, that may have been the truest statement yet. In every monarchy, there comes a moment when the past refuses to let go, when tradition claws at transformation, and loyalty is no longer just ceremonial. For Buckingham Palace, that moment came not with a coronation, but with a confrontation in the corridors of power that would become known as the final appointment. It began with a rumor. Queen Camilla had called a private audience with King Charles. After weeks of silence, sidelined influence, and plummeting favorability ratings, the Queen Consort reportedly made a final appeal to restore her standing and, more critically, to strip Lieutenant Colonel Johnny Thompson of his super equerry title. Multiple palace sources confirmed the meeting took place in the King's private study at Sandringham. Present were only 3 people: Camilla, Charles, and Lord Ashcombe, the King's oldest confidant. What was said inside remains tightly sealed, but what followed was unmistakable. Camilla emerged from Sandringham that evening and, for the first time in months, issued a formal statement via her communications office. Her Majesty remains committed to honoring tradition, protecting the dignity of the crown, and ensuring that appointments reflect the will of the sovereign, not individual agendas. The phrasing was unmistakably sharp. Though she avoided naming Thompson or the Prince and Princess of Wales directly, it was clear Camilla had drawn her line in the sand. She was challenging the legitimacy of the new royal structure and asserting that her influence, tied directly to the monarch himself, was not to be overwritten. But then came the King's silence again. No royal decree followed. No revocation of titles. No statement of clarification. Instead, the following morning, Lieutenant Colonel Thompson arrived at Buckingham Palace flanked by 2 royal footmen. He was not there to resign. He was there to receive a new assignment, this time, personally delivered by William and Catherine. The new title, Senior Command Officer of Royal Transition Affairs. An unprecedented role, created to oversee the operational handoff of responsibilities from Charles's aging administration to William's rising leadership. It was a move that changed everything. He would now oversee internal coordination between royal households, manage confidential personnel audits, and report exclusively to the Prince and Princess of Wales. One senior aide called it a nuclear protocol in silk gloves. Camilla's inner circle was said to be staggered. One of her staffers reportedly stormed out of Clarence House that morning, telling colleagues, "This isn't a monarchy, it's a mutiny." But the public saw something else entirely. Newspapers headlined the reshuffle as "The New Loyalists Rise." Evening broadcasts referred to Thompson as the Iron Kilt. In less than a week, his face appeared on the cover of 3 magazines, not for scandal or glamour, but for the quiet revolution he embodied. Yet for Thompson himself, the transition was far from celebratory. That same week, he received a private message, one confirmed by Kensington sources from an old friend inside the Royal Guard, warning that Camilla's office had launched a behind-the-scenes review of his previous military deployments. The aim was clear: find something, anything to discredit his service record. It was the kind of palace politics Thompson had hoped he'd left behind. According to those close to him, he considered resigning again. But it was Catherine, not William, who convinced him to stay. She reportedly invited him for a quiet walk through the gardens at Kensington. No press, no cameras, just a simple conversation. What was said remains private, but by day's end, Thompson returned to his office and resumed duties with a renewed sense of calm. Later that evening, he released a short statement to the press. "My oath has always been to the crown. I now serve its future." 6 words. But the implication was thunderous. It was the first time in modern royal memory that a senior officer had publicly declared allegiance not to the monarch, but to the heir. Camilla did not respond. Instead, she cancelled 2 appearances, and days later, was reportedly admitted to a private wellness clinic in Gloucestershire, citing exhaustion. Her allies, once defiant, fell quiet. Several members of her staff tendered resignation letters. One veteran press officer called it the end of the Camilla doctrine. As for King Charles, he has not been seen publicly in over a month. The palace maintains he is resting and delegating as planned. But insiders say he has all but withdrawn from internal decisions. In his absence, William now oversees all ceremonial planning, strategic initiatives, and inter-family diplomacy. And beside him, always just a step behind, is Thompson. And so it is here the story circles back to where it began. With loyalty, not the kind printed on royal crests or stitched into velvet banners, but the rare, quiet loyalty forged in service, tested in silence, and ultimately rewarded by trust. Today, Lieutenant Colonel Johnny Thompson is more than an aide. He is the man who stood still when others blinked. The man who took no sides until sides chose him. The man who gave a monarchy in crisis the one thing it had nearly lost, a symbol of duty unmarred by vanity. As William and Catherine step deeper into the roles history has long whispered were theirs to claim, the palace now glows with a different kind of power, less about bloodlines and more about belief. And outside, among the crowds, they no longer shout for thrones. They cheer for something rarer. They cheer for the return of honor.